welcome back. So I have the honor of sitting with three incredible arts leaders now for a really exciting and fun conversation, I hope. But before I let them introduce themselves, I just wanted to share a little bit about why we are having this panel, the impetus. So as I mentioned during the opening, I spent a lot of time on the road this year with so many of you and had so many incredible conversations, which again was just such a light and source of inspiration for me, so thank you for that. And those conversations just spanned so many themes. We talked a lot about new things that you all were trying and successes that you were having. We talked about challenges in the economy and budget cuts and the impact that that was having on you and your teams. We talked about audience development. We talked about subscriptions. Are they dead? Aren't they dead? All of the questions around that. We talked about what the digital landscape is doing right now, how quickly it's evolving with AI and with content creation and the way that people are taking in media. But what I didn't get to talk to a lot of people about is what it was like to hold all of those things at once. Like, that's a lot. That's like a long list of things that are happening. And so many of my conversations focused in one area or another, but we didn't get a chance to talk about what it simply meant to survive with all of those things swirling around us. What it meant to still be able to embrace change, still be able to bring change into your organization, even when it feels like the sands beneath us are volatile, even when we fail, because not all of us are successful every single day and every single time we try something new. And that's hard, and we have to get up and to do it anyway. So that is why I wanted to have this conversation, and that is why I have invited these three incredible humans to join me in this conversation. So our goal today is really to tell the whole story, the ups and the downs and everything in between, and the goal is to talk about what it means to push for change even when things don't go perfectly, what it means to get up and try again the next day, because that's what we all have to do. The goal of today is to share stories vulnerably, openly, collectively, and the goal is to leave all of you with some honest, open, authentic, vulnerable inspiration to hopefully take back to your own organizations and to bring change into your own organizations. So that's why we're here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll go down the line. So Monica, you can go first.
Thanks, Priya.
Of course.
I'm Monica Holt. My pronouns are she, her. I am a pale white woman in her mid-30s with reddish-brown hair, and I'm wearing a blue blazer and Barbie pink shoes, as they were deemed backstage. I am currently the Senior Vice President of, I almost just said marketing, sorry, Derek. I'm currently the Senior Vice President of Artistic Planning and Production at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. For those of you that don't know, the Kennedy Center is the nation's cultural center. It is a public-private partnership, which means that in, I believe, 1958, there was bipartisan legislation signed by President Eisenhower to create the National Cultural Center. In 1964, it was renamed in honor of President Kennedy. And then in 1971, we opened our doors. So we serve over 2 million people each year at the Kennedy Center with over 2,000 performances and events in that year. And we're also a national leader in arts education, serving all of the states as well as 28 countries. And finally, we are a memorial to John F. Kennedy. We have 8 traditional theatrical spaces at the Kennedy Center, but then we kind of have a plethora of other non-traditional performance spaces, rehearsal spaces, and event spaces as well across the campus. And our largest hall is our concert hall, which is just shy of 2,500 seats. So in my role at the Kennedy Center, I oversee a division that can kind of be grouped into 2 areas. So the artistic planning division is about 40 people, and of that, there are 9 artistic curators. And so each of those curators oversee a distinct line of programming. So be that social impact, dance, theater, international programming, hip hop, contemporary music, jazz, comedy, broadcast, arts and well-being, and a few more that I'm probably forgetting in the moment. And so our team supports all of that programming through these curators. And then we also have the Kennedy Center Opera House Orchestra, which is a 60-member orchestra that serves opera, ballet, and theater at the center. And then there's also the production team. So it's a team of about 8 production managers, directors, and then a team of about 35 union full-time staff who do all of the work in the theaters that you see happen. And then we have about 400 part-time union staff and crew that come in during the year to really make the shows happen. And that is a new construct, having production living in artistic planning. And that started when I began the role here. Just a little more about me is that I've worn a few different hats at the Kennedy Center over the years. So I've been in the opera and I've been general manager for the theater team, but I actually got my start in social and digital media, and then was eventually the director of marketing at the Kennedy Center for a number of years with some familiar faces here from that part of my life. So I'm thrilled to be here and really thrilled to hand it over to Troy.
How do I follow that? Wow, my resume is going to seem a little thin compared. My name is Troy Smith. I'm the director of marketing at San Francisco Opera. I've been there 3 years. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a white male in his mid-50s with gray hair. I'm wearing a yellow and blue striped shirt, blue pants, and multicolored Van shoes that my daughter gave me. And I love them. San Francisco Opera puts on about 8 main stage operas per year. We welcome over 150,000 patrons in our doors every year. My background is in sports. I spent over 25 years in various roles in sports, mainly in Major League Baseball, but also in the NFL and the MLS. In January of 2020, I left sports of my own accord, having no idea that all of the live events were going to shut down a few months later. I took about 6 months off, but I was a theater kid growing up, and I had my eye on the performing arts, and that's really where I wanted to go in my next step in my career, and I had an amazing opportunity at the opera present itself, and I have to say, feeling a little bit like an outsider at first, you all have made me feel very, very welcome. So thank you.
Here.
Shonali.
Troy. So sweet. Good morning, everyone. I'm Shonali Burke. I am the Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer at Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. My pronouns are she, her. I am a South Asian female in my early 50s with long black hair. I am wearing a multicolored purple shirt with a brown blazer, or kind of blazer, and brown trousers with, I think, very cute tan Franco Sarto wedges. Thank you very much. I've been at Arena about a little over 2 years now, and we are, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, and I think we have some Arena alum in the house as well. Arena is not the oldest regional theater in the country, but it's one of the most significant, I feel. Our co-founder, Zelda Fichandler, is called the mother of regional theater for good reason, because she and her husband and Edward Mangum, who were all the 3 co-founders of Arena Stage, were pivotal in the in forming what became the nonprofit resident theater movement. Arena was actually started out as a for-profit theater and then became a 501c3 about 10 years later. We were founded in 1950. We are now situated, we have been situated in the Southwest Wharf area of Washington, D.C., which has seen a significant amount of redevelopment the last few years. It was also the site of one of the first urban renewal projects in the country, which failed miserably. And one of the reasons for that failure, as I've heard it talked about by people who were involved even back then, or who remember it, was because at the time that project failed to develop a sense of community for the area. So with the second round of revitalization, it became very important to the developers that a sense of community be fostered in the area. And with Arena moving into the Mead Center, which is what our 200,000 square foot facility is known as, in 2011, that has really been an anchor for the area. We have 3 theaters, the original Fichandler stage, which is one of the oldest, and I think perhaps the oldest permanent theater in the round in the country, that seats about 680, named for our co-founders. We have a modified thrust, the Krieger, which seats about 510. And then we have a very intimate space, the Colgate Cradle, that seats 200, but it could go up to 216 depending on the configuration. Molly Smith, who retired after 25 years and as artistic director, liked to say that we produce plays of all that is deep, dark, and passionate in the American spirit. And I think what that really translates to for Arena is that we try to examine what life is like in America through the lens of theater, and we focus on American voices, whether that's artists, whether that's producers, whether that's writers. We also try to understand what that looks like to international artists. So for example, one of our productions in the recently concluded season was Angels in America, directed by János Szász, who is of Hungarian origin. We also have a very well-regarded and a long-running fellowship program, the Alan Lee Hughes BIPOC Fellowship Program, that is designed to nurture the next generation of arts administrators for the country, and it's wonderful to see where those fellows go. And a little bit about me personally, I am originally from India. I am left brain and right brain, as in I was a theater kid growing up, but my parents refused to let me study theater until I had a real degree. So I studied economics for my bachelor's degree, and then I did my master's in theater. I was working actress and director before I moved to the US 23 years ago, at which point I did theater PR and marketing, and then worked for a couple of agencies around the country, ran my own business for many years. Worked for the ASPCA here several years ago, where I ran their marketing and communications. And then after 13 years of running my own business, going back to school for business analytics, wanted to come home and found Arena Stage. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. So Priya, thank you so much for inviting us and me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. Thank you for those extensive intros. Those were incredible. So excited to dive in. So the title of our panel is Changemakers in the Arts. So I'm going to start broad with this question. What does the word changemaker mean to you? What is a recent instance in which you leaned into the changemaker in you? And we do have visual aids, so Monica, we will start with you.
My visual aids have very little to do with what I'm going to say. And as the programmer on stage, I'm just taking the liberty to show off the Kennedy Center in this slide. Happy to answer specific questions about those after the panel. I think to your wonderful question, I think for me in particular in the last couple of years, change making has been a lot more about process than outcomes. And certainly those two things are intertwined significantly. But instead of focusing on the outcome, the what that we want to achieve, focusing on how we do that. And that's particularly apparent and important in the way I have chosen to approach the role that I'm in now, which is still very new for me. There's a history of having an artistic leader somewhere that takes a very top-down approach and kind of takes executive decisions and mandates, and that's how things have worked for a long time in our space, not everywhere, but in a lot of places in our industry. And I think for all the reasons I described when I was kind of illustrating what the department makeup is, the Kennedy Center has this, I believe, unique setup for programming where we have all of these subject matter experts running the different divisions of work. And while I think, collaboration will naturally happen when you put creative people under one roof, my approach here has been with a process that is very explicitly about uplifting a creative collective versus a top-down vision. And for us, yes, it's the 9 curators, but that also includes, we have artistic directors, Jason Moran, Renee Fleming, Jenny Coe. We also, Simone, who runs our hip hop program, has a hip hop council where she gets input that way. Jane in dance has a community council of dance leaders in the Washington metro area. And so their input comes to the table through her as well. And it can be really difficult, as any change is in principle. It can also be harder than just saying, this is what we're gonna do, and now I'm asking everyone to do it, right? It's harder to say, let's uplift a collective rather than let's just make a decision and have folks execute on it. But the truth is, for me in this role, I'm not the expert in the room. I'm just not, right? There are people with decades more experience than me in this field broadly, in their specific area, from the Kennedy Center. And if I am not taking an approach of trying to uplift their voices and use the power of many to come up with a vision that speaks for more, then I see myself as failing in this role, in this moment. And very selfishly, it gives me a lot of opportunity to learn and to be curious and to come from a place of wanting to hear more, wanting to understand more, and then helping thread these connections between the different programmatic areas and leaders. And that process work, for me, that's about approach, but kind of my history at the center has been about process, as in, these are the steps that we take to do X, Y, or Z assignment. Here's how we document it. So change is something that I am really comfortable with from a process perspective. And I believe that foundationally, the work on systems, the work on community, and the work on culture, those processes are what will feed to a change outcome. So that's been my focus, certainly the past year, and I suspect it will be for some time to come.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Troy?
Change, it's not something I think I'm particularly ever worried about. I don't know why, I'm just sort of wired that way, but I think it always begins with listening. You can't have change until you know kind of the culture you're working in. And for me, coming into the arts from sports, I did a lot of listening, learning and understanding the board, leadership, what they wanted. And as we were sort of looking at our landscape and our reality, as many of us have faced an audience that saw, in our case, 20% attrition through the pandemic, how do we recover them? And how do we get them to come back? How do we increase frequency? How do we get that habit of coming back? And when I was listening to the board talk, their number one thing was, we just want people to see the art. We just want more people to see what we're producing. And not once did they talk about revenue. Never did they talk about the dollars. And that was, coming from sports, that was a really different thing. And I took a step back, and we decided to be very, very aggressive in welcoming back people and welcoming people for the first time into the opera. And as you can see, we have this program that was subsidized by the Dolby family, and we created it in their cooperation to welcome people almost as a thank you for their support of 100 years of San Francisco opera. This was during our centennial season. We offered people who had not been to the opera in the last 3 years to come and purchase 2 $10 tickets to a main stage production during the season. And they could do it once, and we allocated 100 tickets per performance in good seating locations. And they went on sale about a month before each production started. It was an experiment. We had no idea how it was going to be received. Our message to everyone was, we want to welcome you, and we want to thank you for your support. Even if you haven't come to us before, haven't been in a while, you're still a part of the community. What happened was, it was an overwhelming demand for these tickets. People, they were selling out within hours. And we felt just all of this goodwill generated from this program. And it was almost an unintended consequence, or an unintended result. It's like, wow, people really appreciate just being invited to come in. And we sold over 8,000 tickets, and we had about 4,000 accounts. 70% of them were brand new to us. And 87% of people who we sold tickets to actually showed up, which was a really big deal. With a very low price ticket, you don't always know. So it was really adopted and embraced. But how do you sell a somewhat radical program to people that change, right? How do you sell that? Well, I didn't have to, because it came from just listening. This is what they wanted. I mean, they didn't have this program in mind, but the strategy behind it, the goals behind it were already there. So it really was born of listening. And so when I think about change, you really have, before you change, you really have to listen and then act.
Yeah.
So I guess.
Yeah. And listening is also all about the collective, like Monica was saying as well. So that was great. Thank you. Shanali?
Yes to all of the things and the everything. I think the big thing, I think the one core truth about change is if you're going to embrace it, you have to be willing to let go of old stuff or stuff that just isn't working. And that means doing experiments and trying things and not having an expectation that, well, it has to do this or it's a failure. Well, maybe it didn't generate the revenue or whatever, but maybe you learned things and that itself is a success. At Arena, I oversee what are now 4 fairly distinct areas. I oversee marketing, communication, media, so everything that you think would go in there. I oversee what we call it earned revenue, which is all ticket sales, but also all building generated revenue, because we rent out our facility for events and so on. We also generate revenue from concessions and parking. I oversee audience services, which is all of house management, front of house, the bartenders, and making a lot of money there. And the usher program, which obviously is critical for an organization like ours and many of you as well. And then really recreating our IS, our information systems department, as a business intelligence and IS unit, because data and analytics are something that I just love. So I was fangirling big time with Colleen earlier this morning, and I'm just like super, super huge fan. So I think for us, at least in the last 2 years that I've been there, I would say that 3 areas, and I was trying to remember the 3 words to use. I would say one would be integration, really looking at how do we integrate across departments, across the organization. How are we setting ourselves up to be an internal agency to really serve art and tell the stories of the productions on stage in a way that people understand, so that they actually come in to experience the art. And I don't think you can do that if you're not really listening and understanding the core of what that message is, but then you have to communicate it in a very clear way, because nobody has the time to decode a 500-word email. The second part of that, I think, would be just that I think we have changed how we communicate to be much more conversational. I hear this all the time, and anecdotally it makes me very happy, but I also see it in our data, because our email list has grown 118%, no, not 180%, but it's grown 18% year over year, which is pretty significant, given that we do a lot more email now, and we also approach email in a very, in a way that's more e-commerce oriented. We're not always selling, but we're showing up. And I think that showing up part is really important, and that's one of the things I learned when I joined Arena Sage wasn't really happening. The emails weren't going out, and to Colleen's point earlier, it's like, what are people doing in the pandemic other than looking at their phones and looking at their devices and their computers? So our emails have become a lot more nimble, and we have one of the screenshots that you see is this marketing calendar where it's evolved now from that image, but we're really looking at content and how are we integrating the different types of content, how are we integrating that with different promotions and sales and and all of the good things. How are we making sure that it's also a mix so that it's not just sales all the time, but we're telling stories, we're showcasing different sides of the productions, the artists' arena, and so on. And then the third piece would be data. We have a very, very strong drive at this point for not just data-driven marketing, but data-informed decision-making. We put together pretty in-depth analytic reports that we pull from multiple sources, including Google Analytics and Tessitura Analytics. And we do a really deep dive that goes to leadership every week that shows, okay, this is what happened, this is what moved the needle. We're not yet to the place of having a full-on regression model, but I hope to get there soon. And that also means having the willingness to let go of something that I personally or somebody else personally might love from a marketing point of view that, oh my God, I love that ad so much. But if it's just not performing, you gotta let it go. So I think those would be the three things for us.
Yeah. I mean, those are three great themes and three things I think you have to embrace for the sake of change: the idea of the collective, the idea of listening, truly listening, and the idea of creating space or letting go. And I think without those things, change becomes even harder. I think that's already hard. Okay, so let's dive a little deeper. And I'm going to ask a should question, and let's just first acknowledge there are plenty of things happening on everyone's plate. No one has enough bandwidth. All of those things are very true. So keeping that to the side, though, for one moment, from your perspective, what should we as an industry be focusing on right now that, in your opinion, is not getting enough focus? And why do you think that is? Monica, we can start with you again. Just down the line.
I know, exactly. You're prepared. For me right now, it's how we talk about the art. And it's something that we've talked about a lot. It's something that I know is on everyone's mind. I hope it's on everyone's mind. I think during the pandemic and coming, out into this new phase, this new era, we spend a lot of time focused on what audiences aren't coming back? What are the numbers of folks in each demographic area that are and are not attending? What do we think are the motivators as to why they will come into a space or not? How much of that is related to health and safety? How much of that is related to the performance on stage, et cetera? I think all of us at this point are very familiar with the decks about who's coming back when and what the trajectory is. But what we kind of missed as we were bringing people back was a really in-depth look at what are we saying? Not about the safety, not about the, it's a change and masks are optional or, XYZ. How are we describing the experience and the shows, and how is that different than how we used to? Because people sat at home for a long period of time and their entertainment habits changed, their engagement habits changed, and the things that they look for in an experience changed. And this will kind of, I think at some point we're going to talk about, marketing and programming and how do they get along.
Oh, it's coming.
And we'll get into that in a second. But I think from my perspective, it's how has our language changed that we're using to get people interested in the art on our stages. And Ruth Hart, Culture for Hire, talks about this really well, and the way that she looks at how ads are used in the corporate setting versus the nonprofit, and specifically the nonprofit art setting, I think is worth everyone taking a look at, because it really raises some good questions. Yes, we need to be simple and clear, but have we fallen back into kind of the marketing machine of pre-2020 and not necessarily learned a new language to use to describe the shows? And I think that can be about inspiration, it can be about invitation versus alienation, but it's also how do we get it to not be boring and routine? And
Yeah.
with each symphony concert that comes up, are we kind of using the same 10 adjectives to describe a soloist that 30% of the people you're emailing actually really know in depth why they should care about that person? So I think that for me is kind of the trigger point at the moment in terms of language and imagery to a certain degree.
Yeah.
How have we changed? What are we trying to change in the way we talk about art? Because it's a new day,
Yeah.
and we need to take that as a transformative change moment.
Yeah.
And I don't know that industry-wide we have done that yet.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we talk so often about this privilege that we all have to work in such a magical industry, and yet I think it's easy on a day-to-day basis to completely forget about that.
Yeah, and Ruth talks about it herself as a relevancy strategist. And I kind of think that's what everyone in marketing, advertising, comms right now needs to reframe their job as. Why a relevancy strategist? Why is this relevant right now to this person or this segment of people that are receiving the message?
Yeah, I love that.
100% agree. And each production is individual. Each one is different, and we have the ability now. We can get into AI later, but to scale up how we communicate by production. But I'm going to get a little wonky, if you don't mind, for what I choose, what the industry should be focused on, and I'll bring you're going to hear this, I'll bring this historical sports thing to it. One of the things I didn't understand coming into performing arts is this culture of putting tickets on sale at full price, waiting to see how they go, and then when they're not selling at the very end, discount them and get them out. And I was like, well, we know months and months ahead through predictive modeling which tickets aren't going to sell. We get those clues and that data almost immediately. Act then as opposed to waiting until the end. So we discount very early. The Dolby program is an example of that. It's not super early, but it's a month before, and then they go off sale, and they're not available anymore. We've actually begun to rush, and we all do rush. We're doing rush a month and a half to 2 months before the performance. And we know the distressed inventory. We allocate it. We put it on sale for 12 hours. It's gone. You took care of that problem 2 months ahead of time. Then you allow the market forces to apply themselves as you get closer to the performance. And theoretically, the revenue then follows. We have seen that happen. We have seen that success. So I guess for us in the room, throwing things on their head and thinking, well, why do we do it this way? What is it? Is it reinforcing behaviors that we want or don't want in our patrons? And then how do we flip it on its head? So we are doing that, but I have to say it's disruptive. Like when I first proposed it, it was, I said, why do we do rush the day of the performance? It doesn't make any sense to me. Let's do it 48 hours before and just for a short, and then it's online only. And so we tried that. It worked pretty well. There were some hurdles. It was like, really? What's this guy talking about? And then we really amped it up with this month and a half to 2 month strategy that we did this year, and it's actually been quite effective. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But that's just, I don't know. That's like a really specific thing. But I think it's valuable for us to think about because we do have the data now. We know those distressed tickets. We know who they are. And that allows you to kind of paint the house too and make it look great, like way before it takes all that pressure off. Like so.
Yes to the yeses. I think, I'm going back to the question of what should the industry be focusing on, because there's so many things. But I think it is really giving the people what they want. And by that, I'm not going to get into the programming conversation because I think that's still coming. So I'm not going there yet.
Spoiler.
But by that, what I mean is, if you're constantly hearing that people want to be able to buy their mini subscriptions at the start of the season, let them buy the mini subscriptions at the start of the season. If they want flexible subscriptions, how do we find a way to make that happen? Because if what we are saying is that we want more people to come in the doors to experience the art, we want to grow beyond the bubble of the traditional arts consumer. Everybody wants that, right? Everybody wants more subscribers, more members, more donors, all of the things that we've all been screaming and shouting about for decades. But yet it's not happening. I think we really need to be looking at why isn't that happening at the rate we want it to happen. And I think one of the unanticipated benefits of the pandemic, as disastrous and traumatic as it has been and continues to be, and I think will continue to be for some years, is that if you let it, it gave you the opportunity for a reset. And so then how do you use that to really reset and say, okay, I can't do all of the things all at once, but can I try one thing like Troy did with getting the rush tickets out earlier? This season, when we launched the season, we did that. We went out with everything all at once. And it was amazing how that worked in terms of not just revenue generating, but moving us ahead in our subscription goal. When, with POTUS, which is playing right now, and which, is this a good time to say we just crossed our single ticket goal? Thank you very much. We started early getting the inventory out there on our third-party vendors for all of our shows. So not doing the thing where we're just holding it back and holding it back and holding it back, but getting it out there early and then being smart about inventory management. So that when you do have the opportunity to have that additional revenue that comes in through dynamic pricing, et cetera, you can actually make use of that. But I think that also speaks to accessibility, and you're making your art available earlier to more people who want it. And I think if we are not paying attention to what all of the people are saying outside of the arts bubble, then that's a huge opportunity we're going to miss out on.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to move us into the anticipated topic. So a big theme during our prep calls, of course, was the familiar tension, dissonance, call it what you will, of marketing and programming. Collaboration. Yes, we will get there. And we have both represented today. And so both are key players, of course, in making change happen inside of any organization. And so, Monica, I am going to start with you as our sole programming representative. But what does the ideal relationship look like between marketing and programming? And how does that relationship then influence an organization's ability to embrace change?
Let's go. For me, my ideal, which we'll hear some variety on the topic. So one thing that I brought up in our conversations was Sondheim. Gotta bring him into the space. Sondheim, with some frequency, talked about the audience as the final collaborator in a project, that there is the act and the craft of creating art, but that art is not complete until the audience is there, that is when the art is done. And I think that is something that marketing and programming could use as inspiration, as an approach to their relationship. So, you said, and I even said earlier, as the programmer on stage, but with that approach, all of us are involved in programming. We might not be curating the artists or stewarding, the next generation of creators in the same way, but it is all part of the same craft. And I think having lived a little bit in both worlds, I'm very familiar with both sides of the phrase, if a show sells well, then it was programmed well, and if a show doesn't sell, then marketing didn't sell it. And I'll tell you from the programming side, there is a feeling that if the show sells well, marketing gets the credit, and if a show doesn't sell, then they didn't pick the right artist. So I say that to a room of, I believe, mostly in the marketing comm field here, that everyone is feeling the same way. And what that leads me to is, how do we get to a point of joint and shared accountability as we are looking at programming and sales together as one patron journey, as one artistic journey? That's hard, right? That is talk about change, and that's a different approach, particularly when some of these departments can be really siloed from each other. But it is this kind of consistent need for feedback, right? So if the marketing team isn't getting enough information or access to the programs that are being put on stage, how could we possibly expect them to know how to tell that story, how to use new language, how to reach people effectively, right? They need a script for a new show or video access for a show that's been around. There needs to be a way for the marketing team to fully engage in the art. And that has to be provided by programming, but we also need the marketers to invest themselves in what they are doing and not just taking the copy that they got because it was, already done in a couple other markets and you could throw that online, and there are so many shows to do. We feel this immensely at the center, right? There are over 2,000 events a year. It is hard to not constantly be churning and instead to take the time to focus on each individual aspect. The flip of it is, programmers need to hear what the marketing team is saying about how audiences are reacting in the space, what they are responding and engaging to, and what they are not. Because if we're seeing audience as the final collaborator, and we're creating beautiful art, but that maybe doesn't have an audience in our city, then that's something that needs to be evaluated too, right? We need to speak to the people we want, and yes, we want to change them. We want them to go along for a journey. We need those folks who enjoy an avant-garde experience too. But that needs to be put in a way that makes sense over the course of a season of offerings. And for marketing's work there, it's not just, the ticket sales aren't happening. We're not seeing the usual people come through that we would for this show. It would be providing a deeper understanding of who is responding to the show. And if we're doing something new, have we gone outside of our usual marketing toolbox to see about how we reach a different audience, or an audience that isn't inherently part of our normal machine, in order to go to that performance or to engage in a program? And I think that's really tough for both departments to commit to. And this churn piece that I talk about feels really real in every day that we do. It is both for programming and in marketing. As soon as a show is over, it is hard not to just start working on the next show. But if we can't make space to reflect on what has happened, then we're back into this loop of doing the same thing over and over and just saying, audiences weren't able to show up for this, and programming thinking, you didn't marketing it well, marketing thinking you chose an artist or art form that wasn't going to bring audiences. So there has to be this accountability to each other that would ultimately lead to the feedback loop that we kind of need between these groups that makes the art possible in the way that it's being imagined by the organization as a whole.
Yeah. Are there practices that you feel like you've brought
We're trying.
in? Yeah.
I would say I think having been in the marketing world, and frankly having worked with a lot of the current marketing team that is at the center, it puts me in an interesting position here.
Absolutely.
Right? I think, frankly, the programmers are a little more hesitant to complain about marketing in front of me, because there's a little bit of or it'll be prefaced with I know that, you hired, or you've worked, or you made this process, 7 years ago, but, and that I'm trying to break down, just be like, guys, we gotta all, kind of put our issues on the table together. Yeah. But I think my partnership with Derek in particular, I don't know if he's here, but he's speaking tomorrow, and has been really helpful, because we can really, having worked together in marketing, we can have really honest conversations about what's happening, where the dialogue isn't happening on either side. And I think one of the things that we are trying to pursue right now is that shared accountability piece, bringing together people, because we're very lucky that our teams get along personally very well. There's a lot of respect person to person on those teams. But even still, with so many shows, it's really hard for people in programming to not feel neglected at times.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for marketing to feel like they're not getting an impossible task with so much being thrown at them. So some of that is a broader recalibration of, letting quality lead quantity sometimes from an overall output of the center perspective. In order to fix some of these issues and to progress, we need to have a bigger evaluation of how we can make space to really have those conversations take time and move forward. So I would say it's a work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Aren't we all? I'm going to switch it up. Shanali, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. Well, so a lot of what Monica talked about in terms of, having that joint voice and having that shared collaboration, I think we've really been trying to do that. I think because I come from an agency world, my goal has always been, how do I best serve the client? How does the team best do what the client needs it to do? And that's very clear to everybody on my team, whichever department they're in, that how are we being of greatest service? And so I have no problem with artistic looking at the copy we come up with or the basic message for a show. I'm like, is this okay? Is this mirroring? Does this say what you needed to say? Is this true to the show? Mm-hmm. Now, I might tweak it and edit it and all of that, and then we go out and do what we need to do in 500 iterations of it. But I actually really like that, and for me that's really important, that artistic science often says, yes, this abstract for each show or whatever we're trying to do, this works, this fits, and then I feel like we are then truthfully communicating about the production. So for us, that's just how we are approaching it. I think what is important is a reality check. And that is, the tropes about, well, when it does well and when it doesn't do well and all of that, of course, but it's difficult to justify, and I'm completely making this up, a high revenue goal for a show that historically you just know it's not going to do well. But if it's that important to do that, to produce it, to present it, whatever version it's taking, because it's an important piece of art, I get it. And that's great, because if that is what is keeping us true to our mission, I'm all for it. But I think then there just has to be realism about what that is going to achieve at the box office. And for me, that's where the stress comes in. It's, and things change all the time. And we roll with it. That's what we do in the arts. But I think that is what I've experienced, and that's what I've seen, and that's what I think my colleagues, this stress is no stranger to those of us in the larger marketing communications space. And I think, as Monica said, it's no stranger to our artistic colleagues. And the question is, how are we going to let ourselves be vulnerable enough to come to the table and have that truthful conversation without feeling one or the other is going to get smacked down?
Yeah. Understanding the intention almost behind the program itself.
Exactly.
Do you feel like inside of your organization you have that level of communication with the programming side to understand sort of the intention behind the season or individual programs?
we try really, really hard. We try really, really hard. So the intention is there.
Yeah. Troy?
Well, my role in this is sort of the counterpoint. I will say I do agree with everything Monica and Shanali have said. There has to be a collaboration in there. I bring a different perspective. I don't want artistic thinking about marketing. I want them to be thinking about the art, and I think naturally they do think about marketing because they want people to come see the show, but I want them to be focused on the art and creating the best art possible. Now, that's just a very black and white statement. In my past life, I worked at the Oakland A's, by the way, and I have a former colleague here, Jill. I didn't want Billy Beane thinking about marketing when he was creating the team. I just wanted him to create the best team he could. And they would give us a risk assessment on which players they were going to trade and which ones. So I brought that sort of mentality to the arts. I looked at the productions and created risk assessments for them. And I'll give an example that just happened. It's relatively new. We had an opera we just finished, The Revolution of Steve Jobs. And everyone told me, oh, you're not going to be able to sell this. It was on the schedule right before the pandemic hit. Subscribers didn't want anything to do with it. It wasn't selling well. And so it's like, oh, great. There's a risk assessment on this one. And as a marketing team, we all got together and we said, okay, here's what's telling us. Subscribers don't want to see the show. This is an opportunity for us to reach new audiences. We completely changed our messaging and our media mix, went heavy into influencer marketing, heavy into audience segmentation on digital. We bought lists of tech enthusiasts, and we really went heavy into a totally new audience. My point here is and this is again a black and white thing, which it's not a black and white thing. If Artistic had looked at marketing and said, we may never have produced this opera. They would have said, oh, this is too risky. No one's going to show up. We're not going to get there. But what it gave us as marketers was an opportunity to reach new audiences. And we just got the demographic overlay information on the single ticket buyers for Steve Jobs. And they were younger. They looked very much like our current patron base, like in terms of education, ethnic makeup. But they were younger by about 20 years, and made more money. And we have some rich current patrons already, and these were even richer. And I was like, all right, I think we got the right people. So I guess that's another way of thinking about it, is treating these risks as opportunities. And another sort of point that we did as a marketing team in terms of getting collaboration with Artistic is we just took people from Artistic and now they work in marketing. We have Michael Bragg is our head of digital content, was the opera librarian, and now he does all of our digital content. So that helped too, is really having that collaboration. So I don't know.
I actually think that what you just said, that's clearly my path, right? I went director of marketing, and then I was like, director of theater programming. How? The grace and graciousness of our VP of theater at the time, Jeffrey, being like, I think you can do this. So the fact that you are loving having folks from Artistic and marketing, the fact that I think marketing gave me a whole different lens that I could bring and be in service to the Artistic team, like, not to sow chaos amongst the group here, but take a look, see how else your skills can be used and your mindset can help create change within your organization. I think that's such a great point.
And just to piggyback on both of y'all, my team finds it very funny when I say y'all. They're like, you're from India. And then when I say all y'all, it really gets them going. I want to agree with you violently in a very tame, peaceful way.
We call that speed agree.
In a very calm, meditative, Priya way. I completely agree that I want Artistic focusing on the art. What I meant was I get that core message approved, and then please let me go and do my thing. Because then we're looking at the data and say, okay, what do we need to be flipping, and do we need to be getting into more guerrilla marketing tactics or whatever there? So I just wanted to clarify that. My problem is not that that we could, I wish we could pull people from other departments. They're stealing all my people. Can you just stop stealing my people, please? Joking. Anybody who's watching this on the live stream later on. But it is kind of neat. I mean, it's obviously nice, if you hire folks in the box office and they end up in community engagement or they move to, wherever they end up moving. But that's one way, certainly, of growing collaboration within the organization.
So it's interesting. So, sorry, we've thought about this conversation a little bit. But what you were talking about, Troy, about risk, I think to me that is unrelated to the conversation I'm having, because there needs to be a risk profile for a season, a center, a theater at large. And so you have to be able to do the risky shows. I agree with you, Steve Jobs. I'm sorry that you were being warned in such a way, because you just got to make hay where you have it, and let's go. but so for me, it isn't about, oh, marketing needs to be informing programming, and therefore we will do populist-centric programming year-round. But it is about that collaboration, and I understand why it's been, marketing approves a blurb and then, programming approves a blurb and then marketing goes out and does what they need to do with it. And certainly tactically, technically, and strategically, I obviously understand wanting that division of labor and wanting, our curators to focus on the art and the stewardship of the artists. But I just challenge in the same way of this whole idea of creating a creative collective that it is very rare, particularly in our industry, that more minds on a problem isn't going to create a better solution than fewer. So I do think that there needs to be some openness on both sides, from marketing not making as clear lines in the sand about when artistic's input ends. And on artistic side, the same thing. Again, it's, I joke that everyone can be a programmer, but everyone can be a programmer, right? I think I know everyone on my team who is in a curatorial position has probably heard of an artist or an experience from someone else that has then been brought into their portfolio. And so if we are thinking more broadly about the impact we can have for the organization as a whole, whether you sit in programming or marketing, I think that could open up some more doors about who we reach and how we reach them. So I do disagree a little bit about the clarity of, direction being one side or the other. But variety is the spice of life. So it's good that we don't all agree. Otherwise, this would be a really boring conversation.
I agree with that. We talked a lot about people, and we talked about stealing from teams and not stealing from teams. But let's talk about our team, because I think change, to me, without a certain foundation in your team, means something very different than what it means with the type of foundation that perhaps feels ideal. So let's talk about your current team makeup and your current team culture and how that influences your ability to embrace change every day. And we do have visuals for this, so we have to go in order. I'm sorry. Monica.
So there are 2 teams up there, and during this process, we learned that I did a really bad job of taking photos of the programming team. So that's why that's a professional photo on the left. So I will try and be brief because I feel like I've taken a lot of airtime. So just to say that the group of us with badges there is kind of an accumulation of folks who were on the marketing team when I was there several years ago, and this was us coming back this summer and being in one space, some of whom are no longer at the organization. And I would just say, in building the marketing team the way we did, 12 or so years ago, the approach there was very change first, because we were adding positions, it was new. My job in that moment, I felt, was to really bring energy and excitement and experimentation to a group that was just building something for the first time at the center. So then the other photo that's up there is mostly our social impact team with some of our community partners and lots of other staff from the center. But joining the programming team when I did, and taking this role and the responsibility with it, it's a very different approach to change, right? As I mentioned, a lot of these folks have been at the center longer than I have. They have watched me grow up at the center and informed my growth at the center. And so it really comes more from a place of clear common kind in the approach for the team. Because as we're learning, as we want to grow, a lot of people on the team have been told change was going to happen, and it did or did not. It was successful or it failed. And so I need to be treating that trust building as the change management, because maybe that didn't always happen. So it's a bit of a longer lead as change would happen on our team now. And the really important thing that I need to get to is, it can be a long lead, but then there has to be deliver. I have to show up, and that change has to make a positive impact for the group as a whole and understand the impact and ramifications for each individual. So I would say, not in a bad way about the marketing team, which I loved so dearly, but I think I am a little more careful and calm and deliberate in this role, and that's also just part of growth, in any arena. So
Yeah, you have a complicated job.
yeah.
Mine's a little more straightforward, but yeah, just marketing. But about a little over a year ago, my boss left just on the cusp of the beginning of the centennial season, and three key managers left, all in the space of about 2 months. And while it was chaotic and scary, it did allow us to rebuild the team, and the culture we really wanted to create was collaboration and trust and ownership. Each of our members of the marketing team own what they do, and they own it together, and they're always challenging each other and asking questions and making decisions and acting daily, looking at the data, reacting to it, not waiting. They don't wait for me. Tyler is here somewhere. He will act on digital campaigns immediately. And they have the ownership to do that. The other part of it is I share with them the data. I share with them my hopes and my fears on a daily basis. They get tired of me saying the same things over and over again. One of the things that I talk about is volume over revenue, and not to be just another black and white thing. Of course, revenue is important. But we had to have some kind of hierarchy, and we have bought in, the whole organization has bought into bringing back volume, bringing back audiences. But I struggle with it. Yes, it's my mantra, I guess, but it's also something I struggle with. So the sign on the right is a sign, many of you, I don't know if you are familiar with Ted Lasso, the TV show. He puts a sign up over the clubhouse that says believe, and it's a message to the team to believe in themselves. I guess I'm the Ted Lasso in this. I never thought about it that way. It hit me yesterday. I guess I'm the outsider who doesn't know anything about what he's walking into. The flip side of this and the illustration of how this team works together is, instead of me putting that over my door, the team made that for me. And they put that over my door so I could remember. So they have my back. So I mean, I'm so thankful for them. 2 of them are here. They're so talented, and they remind me of some of the teams that I worked with at the A's who have all gone on to really great things. And so very, very thankful and excited about that.
I don't know how I follow that.
Such a good story.
So that's the beautiful Mead Center that you see on the left. It's really a stunning skyline, and that is almost all the full team that you see. And when I say full team, I mean across those departments. And it's been one of, I love them so much. They're the best people. Their spirit, their tenacity, their willingness to just, sometimes I'm like, and let's try this, and they're like, okay. To just willingness to go with it just warms my heart. And I also love that they are not scared of telling me when something's not working. And I really, or it's not working for them. And both of those things are really important, that it's got to work, but it's got to work for them. So, like I said, there's about 41 between full-time and part-time outside of, our ushers and all of that. And I think what they are really starting to excel at is that integration, working together. And it's difficult because different schedules, the sales office is coming in at a different time. Our house managers are at a different time. The marketing team is in at a different time and all the time. But really finding ways to support each other, help each other out. And I am a huge proponent of instant messaging platforms like Slack, which we don't use. But we do use Teams. So I think and because I come from outside of more recent arts administration, I've done a lot of nonprofit. I've worked a lot in tech, a lot with SaaS companies, and so for me, it's like, how quickly can you communicate? Just tell each other what's going on, so that you have each other's back, and I'm really seeing that that culture grow, and I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a great point. Managing up. I mean, I think having your team be able to tell you what's not going well is critical. Challenging you. And that's as a young professional coming up, learning to manage up is a valuable skill. I've made a ton of mistakes.
Absolutely.
So that was a great point.
We are so over time. So we're going to do rapid fire, piece of advice, only one sentence. Don't explain what you mean. Just say it and then let it breathe. Piece of advice for our attendees today in how you can truly go back and embrace change. Any advice you have?
Failure is sometimes the best way to learn.
Yes.
Make friends with data.
Yeah, believe what you see and act on it.
I love that. Thank you all so much for joining me.